What I saw over those 10 days changed the way I think about the future. Not emotionally, not politically, structurally. And I think every American should pay attention, because when you step outside your own country long enough, you stop seeing headlines and you start seeing patterns. And patterns are everything. I've spent decades studying how countries rise, how they decline, how wealth shifts, how debt builds, how internal conflict slowly weakens great powers from within. And when you look at history long enough, you realize something uncomfortable. Most people only recognize major change after it's already happened. Rome didn't know it was declining while it was declining. The Dutch Empire didn't know it was losing dominance while its people were still wealthy. And Britain still believed it was the center of the world long after the numbers started telling a different story. That's the dangerous thing about big cycles. They move slowly until suddenly they move very fast. And during my time in China, I wasn't looking for confirmation of fears or optimism. I was looking for reality. What's actually happening beneath the surface? Because when nations compete, the loudest country is not always the strongest country. Sometimes the strongest country is the one quietly building, quietly planning, quietly thinking 20 years ahead while everyone else is focused on the next quarter. And that difference matters more than people realize. Before we go deeper, if you enjoy conversations that break beyond headlines and explore the deeper shifts shaping our future, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel. These discussions matter now more than ever. What struck me first was the scale. Not just the buildings, not just the infrastructure, but the speed. Entire cities evolving almost faster than perception itself. High-speed rail systems connecting massive economic zones. Advanced manufacturing ecosystems operating with extraordinary coordination. Technology integrated into daily life at a level that would surprise many Americans. But what interested me most wasn't the physical development. It was the mindset behind it. Because countries reflect the psychology of their people and leadership. And in many ways, China thinks differently about time. In the West, particularly in America, we often optimize for immediate results, quarterly earnings, election cycles, short-term popularity, fast gratification. But historically, the nations that become dominant powers tend to think in decades, sometimes generations. And when you combine long-term planning with disciplined execution, you create momentum. Now, that doesn't mean one system is perfect and another is doomed. That's not how reality works. Every country has strengths. Every country has weaknesses. But ignoring a competitor because you dislike them has never worked in history. In fact, that's usually when empires make their biggest mistakes. They become arrogant. And arrogance is one of the most expensive qualities a nation can develop. History shows this over and over again. When countries become successful for long enough, they begin assuming success is permanent. Debt rises, internal divisions grow, productivity slows, political fighting increases, and gradually, attention shifts away from building toward arguing. That pattern is ancient, and it repeats with frightening consistency. Now here's what most people misunderstand. The real competition between nations today is not primarily military. It's economic. It's technological. It's educational. It's about who can produce more efficiently, who can innovate faster, who can maintain internal stability longer, who can manage debt responsibly, who can preserve productivity while others consume excessively. And debt is one of the most important parts of this conversation, because debt changes empires. Always. When countries borrow heavily for long periods of time, they create the illusion of wealth. At first it feels good. Asset prices rise. Consumption increases. People feel richer. But eventually debt creates constraints. And when debt levels become too large, governments face impossible choices. Raise taxes, print money, reduce spending, or devalue currency. None of those choices are painless. And throughout history, Excessive debt has been one of the clearest indicators that a major transition is approaching. Now think about this carefully. If one country is producing aggressively, while another is consuming aggressively, over time, wealth shifts. That's mathematics, not ideology. And during my visit, I saw a country intensely focused on production, engineering, infrastructure, artificial intelligence, energy, manufacturing, education in technical fields, long-term industrial dominance. Again, this doesn't mean they don't have serious problems. They absolutely do. Every major power does. But the important question is not whether problems exist. The important question is which country is adapting faster, because adaptability determines survival. Always. The world changes whether people are emotionally ready or not, and nations that resist reality usually pay the highest price. One of the most fascinating things about history is how predictable human behavior becomes under pressure. When economies weaken, people become more divided. When inequality rises, political extremism grows. When financial conditions tighten, social tensions increase. This isn't new. It's happened repeatedly for hundreds of years. And unfortunately, many people today interpret structural problems as isolated events. They see inflation as temporary, debt as manageable forever, political division as normal. But these are usually symptoms of larger cycle shifts underneath the surface. And when multiple pressures build at the same time, history tends to accelerate. That's why understanding cycles matters so much. Because if you understand where you are in a cycle, you make better decisions. You prepare differently. You invest differently. You think differently. And perhaps most importantly, you stop being surprised by things history already warned us about. What concerns me most is not that another country is rising. That has happened many times before. What concerns me is when great nations lose the ability to look honestly at themselves, because denial delays adaptation, and delayed adaptation becomes decline. Strong countries continuously reinvent themselves. Weak countries defend outdated systems until reality forces painful change. Now, during those 10 days, I also noticed something Americans rarely discuss openly. Competition can be healthy. In fact, competition often creates innovation. Pressure forces improvement. The problem arises when countries become complacent while competitors remain hungry. Hungry nations move differently. They sacrifice more, work longer, plan further ahead, and history shows that rising powers usually possess extraordinary internal drive. That drive changes global balances over time, slowly at first, then suddenly. And here's the part every ordinary person should understand. These shifts are not abstract geopolitical games. They affect your life directly, your savings, your job opportunities, your purchasing power, your investments, your retirement, your children's future. Because when global power shifts, economic rules shift with it. Reserve currencies change. Trade patterns change, capital flows change, and societies that fail to adapt can experience decades of stagnation. Most people assume the future will resemble the recent past, but history says otherwise. The future often looks unimaginable right before it arrives. If you had told people 50 years ago how interconnected technology would become, they would struggle to comprehend it. If you told earlier empires they would eventually lose dominance, they would dismiss the possibility entirely. That's human nature. People extrapolate current conditions indefinitely, until reality interrupts them. And reality always wins eventually. Now, I want to make something very clear. Fear is not useful. Panic is not useful. Blind nationalism is not useful. What's useful is understanding. Understanding creates intelligent action. And intelligent action is what separates people who survive major transitions from those who get crushed by them. The individuals who succeed during periods of change are usually the ones who stay calm while others become emotional. They observe carefully. They diversify intelligently. They remain adaptable. They avoid ideological extremes. And they focus on reality instead of narratives. Because narratives are dangerous when they replace facts. One thing I've learned over decades studying markets and countries is that reality doesn't care about political preferences. Numbers eventually matter. Productivity matters. Innovation matters. Education matters. Debt matters. Competence matters. And countries that maintain those strengths tend to outperform over long periods of time. What I saw in China was not a perfect system, not even close. But I saw determination, focus, strategic patience, and a very clear understanding that the next 20 years are being built right now. The real question is whether America still possesses that same long-term discipline, because America has extraordinary strengths, still. World-class innovation, powerful institutions, entrepreneurial culture, deep capital markets, creative talent. But strengths alone are not enough. History rewards nations that continuously renew themselves. And renewal requires honesty. Honesty about debt, honesty about education, honesty about political dysfunction, honesty about competitiveness, honesty about productivity. Without honest self-assessment, decline becomes invisible until it's advanced. And by then, recovery becomes much harder. That's why these conversations matter. Not to create fear, but to create awareness. Because awareness gives people time to prepare mentally, financially, and strategically for the world that's emerging. And whether people realize it or not, the next decade may reshape global economics more dramatically than most expect. We may witness transformations in currency systems, artificial intelligence, manufacturing dominance, energy competition, and geopolitical alliances unlike anything seen in generations. And during periods like this, calm thinking becomes incredibly valuable. The people who think clearly, while others panic, often gain the greatest opportunities. History rewards preparedness, always. So after those 10 days, my conclusion wasn't emotional. It was analytical. The world is changing faster than most people understand, and major powers are entering a period of intensified competition that will shape the lives of billions. Ignoring that reality would be a mistake. But understanding it, that creates opportunity. If you found this conversation valuable, subscribe to the channel and join us for more discussions that go beyond headlines and examine the deeper forces shaping our future. Because the biggest changes in history are usually visible long before most people are willing to see them.